We won't wait. We won't run. We'll conjure up the courage we need to create solutions for our homeland.
Our Africa.
With our courage, we will innovate for our time.
We will raise up a new generation of independent actors who, with us, will build a new tomorrow.
We won't wait. We won't run.
We'll do it ourselves. We are #DIY Africa.
Welcome to #DIY Africa, presented by the Civic Tech Innovation Forum and Jamfest.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. A warm welcome from Jamfest, which has been co-hosted along with the Civic Tech Innovation Forum. Thank you all for joining us from everyone across the continent and the rest of the world for this year's festival, which is under the #DIY Africa theme. My name is Fatima Musa. I'm a journalist and newsletter editor at the Dailyrx. And I'll be facilitating the session titled Newsletter Best Practices along with Desmond Brown from Cashbase Pro. He'll give a little introduction into himself later on in the session. So the session is being co-hosted by Jamlab and CTIN, and we hope you leave the session, this knowledge sharing session, with a better understanding of what you need to take into consideration before starting a newsletter and what are some of the best practices to take forward. I see the room is, people are slowly starting to join us. So now that we've greeted you, just some housekeeping rules which are on the screen in front of you. Basically, if you'd like to share and tweet about today's conversation, please use the hashtag #JamfestAfrica2021 and #DIY Africa. And we really want this discussion to be interactive. So please drop all of your questions, comments in the Q&A section or in the chat box. And we'll, if you have a question, drop in the Q&A box. And if you have a comment, a query, use the chat function. And we'll tackle those questions towards the end of our presentations. As you are aware, the session is being recorded. So if you have just for privacy concerns, and it will be publicly available on all our the platforms after the session. Yeah, so I'll get started now with my presentation. And like I said, if you have any questions during my presentation, please feel free to drop it in the chat box. Just for the duration of the presentation, I'm going to switch off my camera, but my presentation will be up on screen. So enjoy. So welcome everybody to Newsletter Best Practices with myself, Fatima Musa, and Desmond Brown from Cashbase Pro. Basically, today's session, we're going to be kind of looking at the fact that newsletters have become one of the biggest drivers for the media industry. And today we're going to be looking at some of the top newsletter best practices for digital media newsrooms in Africa. And during the session, you will, I don't want to say you will learn, but we will attempt to teach you a little bit about building and implementing successful newsletters, as well as building rapport with your subscribers. So my presentation will be around 15 to 20 minutes, just for time purposes. And this is a brief breakdown of what the session will cover. So I'm going to look at the Dailyrx has a newsletter called The Top of the Box, which comes out every Friday morning. So I'm going to look at the brief history of the newsletter and how it came about. And then our newsletter had a 150% audience increase in the past year. And then I'm going to be looking at finding a niche and voice for the newsletter, and changing email marketing systems and what that meant for our newsletter and what that can mean for anyone else, and basically some newsletter best practices. So before we get started, I don't want to make everybody work too early in the morning, but if anybody feels like, would you be able to drop a comment in the chat box about whether you subscribe to newsletters and what type of newsletters you subscribe. So what is your favorite newsletter that you subscribe to? Only one, please. So please go ahead and drop this in the chat box if you feel. So I'm just going to share mine while I wait for people to drop theirs in the chat box. So one of my favorite work-related newsletters is the Quartz Daily Brief and Africa Brief. So they make every morning before I start my work day, the newsletter comes out at around 8. So I start by reading that, and it gives me a quick roundup of the news of the day from across the world. So and then the Africa one comes out on a Saturday, and I read it usually on a Monday. And a lot of Quartz articles are paywall, but their summaries are so great that you kind of don't even need to read the article. And for personal reading, I like, there's a feminist writer from Egypt who, Mona Al-Thawawi, and she does a newsletter where she does a roundup of interesting feminist projects from across the continent. So, I mean, I think you may be wondering, why am I talking about newsletters, mentioning my favorite newsletter when we're supposed to be talking about best practices? But you'll find out as we go along. So I see someone has said Splice Intelligence. So Jamlab and Rona Maya says those are their favorites. So I'm definitely going to be signing up to that newsletter once the session is done. And obviously, I like the Top of the Box because I write the Top of the Box newsletter. But yes, please keep those coming. And like I said, you'll find out later on in my presentation why I'm mentioning that. So just to start off with the brief history of the Top of the Box, it started in 2015 as a curation. I see someone has said the MNG newsletter, which is a really great newsletter as well, the Fix, and also Reuters newsletter. So the Top of the Box started in 2015, a year after the Daily Box started. And it was basically a curation of the week's stories and went out every Friday morning. 2 years after it started coming out on a Wednesday and was still a curation of the week's stories Wednesday and Saturday. In September 2018, it only came out on a Saturday. And 2019 was the year of the national government elections. So around April 2019, Sipho Shlongwane, who was our editor at the time, wrote a political newsletter. And then August 2019, unfortunately, because of constraints within our team, we just weren't able to start doing the newsletter. And then in February 2020, the newsletter resumed again, and we had a new kind of, we tried to play around with new ideas around the newsletter, which I'll go into a little bit later. And then last year, around July and August 2020, we changed email service providers. And then for the past 2 months, the newsletter changed to going out on a Friday. So I think you can see even in its short kind of history, the newsletter has undergone a lot of changes. And I think that's important for understanding best practices as well. And with the email service providers, I'm going to touch on that also, but Des is going to go into that a lot more detail about the new email service provider. So this is kind of how the newsletter looked when it initially launched in 2015. As you can see, it basically, this was around 2015, around the Roads Must Fall movement that happened in South Africa. And it was basically a summary of the stories that was going out on the site. It was mainly text-based, and yeah. Then as the years went by, this was, I think, in 2018, then we started adding an image or two, and we would include a lot of scholarship opportunities in the newsletter. And this was because a lot of our audience is students and those at university. So these scholarship opportunities were always welcomed. This is how the newsletter looked when Sipho wrote it, which was the It was a political newsletter, so you can see it's speaking about the jobs crisis because obviously it was election year, and we know job and the economy is an important issue in South Africa always. And we would have at the end of CPO's basically opinion, a summary piece. There would be summaries of the articles that went up on the site. And then this is what the newsletter looked when it really launched in 2020 in February. And initially we wanted to make it only student related. But there was a realization that this didn't work. The open rates and engagement were very low, and the focus had to shift because our audience or our subscriber base who initially signed up might have been students, but now 3-4 years later, obviously that had changed and they weren't in that same interest at that point in their career, perhaps. So we had to change the thing. So along with Murray Hunter, who worked at SAMUP, the South African Media Innovation Program, I made some changes to the newsletter. And then we saw an increase in our user rate and how engagement rate. And this is basically a look at how the newsletter, where recently, this is how, if you sign up to the Dailyrx newsletter, this is what it looks like. There's a brief introduction or a brief comment from me. I would speak about what happened in the news or something that caught my eye, and then it would go into the summaries. And we started adding the featured image of each article. And again, I'll go into that a bit more as we go. So now we go into the Dailyrx 150% audience increase. So this sounds like a very impressive number, but I mean, I think it also taught us a lot of lessons about there's something I think Des often mentions to me, and it's something that newsletter people like speaking about, vanity metrics. So I think this 150% audience increase really taught us that lesson, which was great. But this is just a brief overview of how our audience, so we, as you can see, from around end of July, August, we switched over to Cashbase Pro. And this is our, basically how our audience grew from just around 2,000. And now we're sitting at about 8,000. So yeah, I took this at the end of August, but we're sitting at about 8,000 subscribers at the moment. Which, I mean, I guess comparatively perhaps to bigger newsrooms, it's a small change, but for our small newsroom of a team of about 3 people, I think this is something that we especially proud of. So as I mentioned, we relaunched in 2020, just before lockdown, and then we managed to triple the email audience in the 6 months or so. So yeah, it is a combination of vanity metrics, but also implementing some basic best practices. So like I said, we initially relaunched to low engagement, but then we started to make small changes. So those changes included subject line, putting a bit more, making a bit more personal, because that's something that as I mentioned, I asked about your favorite newsletters. There's something about having it addressed to you and knowing that you, like a person is writing it instead of I'm sure no bots write newsletters at this point, but knowing that there's actually someone behind the newsletter helps a lot. So as we say, the newsletter tripled its audience, and reader engagement did change. Sorry. So one of our biggest drivers of how we grew our subscriber base is a pop-up form, because readers can only subscribe to a newsletter when they know there is a newsletter. People aren't going to be going out to search to see, okay, does the Dailyrx have a newsletter? Let me search for it and go and sign up. So we had a simple pop-up form that every time you logged onto the Dailyrx, you would see the pop-up form and you can sign up. So this also drew visitors from our social pages to sign up. So there was that initial spike in subscribers, but our engagement rate and open rate weren't going anywhere. Basically, they were we were seeing red numbers for them. So we realized that even though people were signing up, that didn't necessarily mean that they were actually going and opening the newsletter every time it landed in their email. So that's why we've delayed the pop-up. So now if you're on our site for longer than a minute, that's only when you'll see the pop-up. Because that also kind of tells us that this is someone who obviously is spending a little bit more time on our site. They're interested in our work. They're not just coming to read an article for 30 seconds and leaving. They're there for a little bit more time. So it has, if you can see in this thing, they obviously from around November to May, it's a very steep increase in the numbers. And then it's slowly leveled off, but we're still seeing that numbers of people who are coming through to open our newsletter and to sign up. And as I mentioned, another important thing around newsletters is that people need to understand, readers need to understand there's a person behind it. So like I said, sometimes I have a personal reflection, which could be connected to a news story we've written. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, about 3 weeks ago, we did a story on climate change. So I started with that as kind of personal reflection around my thoughts on climate change. Sometimes we also ask interactive questions, and we don't get tons of, we don't get all 2,000 subscribers or those who have opened us replying to us, but we get at least 10 people who respond to our newsletter. I asked a question about the elections a few weeks back, and people were happy to share their observations around the elections and what they think about it. And all of our newsletters are addressed personally to recipients, obviously, as long as they give us our name. So our pop-up form asks for people's name, for their email address, obviously. And then, so then automatically our email system puts their name in there, and we've added that personalization. But obviously, make sure to get people's consent and let them know what are you using their names for, that it's only going to be used for the newsletter and you're not going to be using it for any other thing, because we don't want you getting on the wrong side of the law. And then my next thing about kind of what I've learned of email best practices is visual all the way. Not visual for the entire newsletter, but put a little bit of images there. So we know you can get, so I mentioned the Quartz newsletter that has a lot of text, but because that's solely about the news, sometimes we can get tired of just reading pages of text. So that's why we brought in images and calls to action. So that just gives people a little bit of break from having to read. And each of our images in our newsletter clicks out to the link of the page. So you don't even have to read, you can click out and then you can go to the page. And a main point around newsletters is to experiment with the layout and design, not drastically. You don't want one day someone opens the newsletter and it looks only text and the next day only images. That could be a bit of a fright to readers. But just a little bit of changes every week, that playing around so that you see, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And also calls to action are very important to include. And this doesn't only mean the articles or landing pages that the person is going to go to. So our current newsletter has so we're running a crowdfunding campaign. So we have the call to action. I just actually last week switched it out to put it at the bottom of the page, but it was at the beginning of the newsletter. So telling people, if you want to donate to us or you want to share this, our crowdfunding campaign, you're welcome to do so. Sorry. So next, again, this is kind of addressing the vanity metrics. So it's very nice having a big newsletter subscriber base of 8,000 subscribers. It sounds very amazing, the number, but it doesn't help if your open rate and your click-through rate is looking very bad and in the red. So what's very important is to re-engage or remove non-openers. So re-engagement is telling people, hey, you know, you've signed up to the Dailyrx newsletter. Are you interested in still in getting our content and being part of this newsletter? Or if you don't want to be part of it, you're very welcome to unsubscribe from the newsletter. It does, it's a bit painful, I guess, sometimes doing that, because then you can see a drop in your subscriber base. But it's very important to have an engaged list rather than a big list. You don't want thousands of people on your list, but none of them are opening a newsletter, because then that doesn't mean anything. It means you're basically sending out a newsletter every week that nobody is reading. And re-engagement is also helpful, because perhaps someone signed up and they forgot. And now you're sending them the like, okay, I signed up for this newsletter. I should open it the next time it pops up. So yeah, re-engagement is very important, because that ensures that you can also it's again about that personal touch. It's telling people, some people might be a little bit I know I got one email from someone being like, "Why? How do you know I don't open your newsletter?" And they found it a bit of an invasion of privacy. But I mean, obviously, you can explain to them that part of signing up, and then obviously that means you need to explain to people that once you signed up to our newsletter, we have access to whether you read our newsletter or not. And I mean, this comes, so this next point comes back to the question I asked, which is finding your niche. So, I mean, obviously in newsletters, you can do all of the best practices, but what keeps people subscribed is what are they reading? So you could have the most fantastic layout, subject line, tick all of the boxes, but are you giving people important information or what they want? So that's why when I mentioned what newsletters are you subscribed, we subscribe to newsletters that give us information that either is an interest of us, or we need it for work or anything like that. So you need to be able to create that connection with your audience. Say, I'm giving you this content that you want. And there's also kind of, I'm going to touch on this a bit later, but about catering to your audience's preferences, which is very important. So yeah, finding a voice. What are you providing that's different from others? So that's also important. I mean, obviously we look at what newsletters, best practices from other newsletters. Like I said, I like the Quartz newsletter. MG's newsletter is really good as well. Daily Maverick has a really good newsletter. We have Explain, which is another South African media newsroom. They have a great newsletter. I think it's a Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. All of those are great newsletters, and you can look to those newsletters for inspiration. But always make sure that you are different. You don't want to be doing what other people are doing, and you don't want to be copying what they do. So yeah, this is basically just a little bit of a idea, but newsletters are the thing. But I think it's important to always know what you want to achieve before you start the newsletter, because they aren't always the solution to. Excuse me. They aren't always the solution to whatever you're hoping to achieve. So make sure to do your research. Know, do your audience want to read a newsletter? What do they value? So it's important to, before starting. So when the Dailyrx newsletter started, I wasn't working at the Dailyrx, so I don't really know what type of audience research was done. But I think in this past few years that I've been doing the newsletter and the various workshops I've attended and information I found, it's very important to do that audience research before. So whether it's a survey or whatever type of research you're going to do in whichever way, find out, do people want a newsletter? Perhaps they don't want a newsletter, they want a different form of summary of your work. And also, what type of newsletter do they want? So it's important to remember that perhaps newsrooms want newsletters, but your readers are going to be your potential subscribers. So you need to find out from them, what do they value and what do they want? But a fun thing about newsletters is experimentation. So even if you start a newsletter, you don't have to keep it the same way for out. As you've seen from the images I've showed, the Dailyrx newsletter is still going through changes at this point. So it's important to just go through basically experiment. And this is just a brief examples of the types of newsletters you can do. So the newsletter that the Dailyrx does is aggregated content. We basically aggregate the content from our site. But you have promotional, we all know we get those tons of promotional newsletters that you sometimes want to mark as spam because they're too much. Informative, transactional, content marketing. Those are just the different types of newsletters you get. And now I'm getting to the end of, because I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing my voice, but changing email marketing systems and kind of what that meant for our newsletter. So we moved from MailChimp in, like I said, in July, August, to Cashbase Pro. And yeah, this was also an experiment we did. Part of the summer program, we were given a trial with Cashbase Pro, and it was just an experiment to see how it would work with our newsletter, with our audience. So last July, we moved over to Cashbase Pro. And so we migrated with our subscriber base of just under 3,000 contacts and just less than 2,000 with subscribers. And so it was a huge positive for us changing emails. And I'm not just saying that because Des is in the room with us, but it was a huge positive just because we got a lot of advice on the things that we were doing in terms of how, when I was stuck with something, when we wanted to change, perhaps create another newsletter list, the team at Cashbase Pro were there to give us that advice. And I think that was very helpful for, sometimes I was puzzling over things and it was too confusing. And the Cashbase Pro team were there to help. So I'm not going to go too much into how the Cashbase Pro system works and all of that, because I think Des will go into that. But yeah, basically it was a huge positive for us. And it kind of speaks to the point of sometimes it requires a big change of changing your whole email marketing system. And again, like for people who signed after the newsletter, it didn't inherently look different from what they got before. There weren't any big changes in terms of, like initially it looked like the same newsletter. It was still the top of the box. It still gave you that same information, but more in terms of how I put the newsletter together, that helped a lot. It made it a lot easier. So just in kind of, I guess, a few points to summarize is before even thinking of email best practices, it's important to understand what you want to achieve. And then what type of newsletter do you want to create? Who's your audience? Finding that suitable internet service provider. We know there's tons of email service providers out there. We have MailChimp, Cashbase Pro, Substack. Facebook has its own, at the moment, I think Twitter has its own email marketing. So there's lots of email marketing systems out there. So it's important to do that research. And then advertising newsletters. So like I said, with the pop-up form, we share it on social media. On our website, we have the pop-up, but we also have separate sign up. We sometimes put it in articles to tell people to sign up. So all the different ways. And then also choosing your metrics. So make sure you don't rely on vanity metrics. It doesn't matter if you have a big subscriber base. You need to know people are opening your newsletter and reading. So like one of the things when I go, when I send out a newsletter on a Friday morning, then by Friday afternoon, I go and look and say, okay, how many links have been clicked? How many people have clicked on links, and what links have they clicked on? And sometimes it's not even the top links that's clicked on, it's right at the bottom, which shows that, okay, the person has read the entire newsletter, which is a really good thing. And also another important thing is understand when things don't work, because I realized that last year, February, we were getting horrendous open rates and it was just not working. And even in the past few months, there have been times when our newsletter has just gotten really bad open rates, click-through rates. It's just not been a good day. And then that's when I've had to say, okay, I need to experiment. I saw there was a question. Someone asked, why did I switch from a Wednesday to a Friday? the distribution date. So I think I'll answer that now, even though we're gonna do questions at the end. Because okay, so there were actually two reasons. So it was about experimenting, but also like I said, our newsroom is very small. So I just didn't have the capacity to do it on a Wednesday because the middle of the week it gets really busy. So Friday, like a Thursday afternoon, a Friday morning is a good time to sit with the newsletter, and it gave me a little bit more room to say, okay, let's switch things around, play around with things. So it was a combination of not having enough time, but also wanting to experiment. So yeah, that's why I have a big slide saying, don't be afraid of change and experimentation, but be open with your readers. So when I was thinking of changing from a Wednesday to a Friday, I did send it out in the newsletter. So there was a public holiday, so I did send one of the newsletters out on a Friday. And then in the newsletter, the following week's Wednesday one, I mentioned to the readers to say, did you enjoy the newsletter coming out on a Friday? How do you feel about that happening for the next, for the future? And again, I didn't get all 2,000 people who opened the newsletter saying they preferred it, but I got about 5 to 10 people. So it was about warning people that, okay, this is happening. So don't be surprised that if you don't get it on a Wednesday, especially for our core subscriber base to open and engage with our newsletter every week. Oh, and then one final thing before I round off, which is segmentation. So segmentation is basically, I just want to bring it up because that's something we're looking at the Dailyrx at the moment, which is basically taking your existing list and breaking it into putting it into different segments. So I think the Daily Maverick is a good example of they use segmentation. So if you go to the Daily Maverick newsletter sign up page, they have all their different products. So they have first things first, I think so. They have for their different products, they have different newsletters. So already with Cashbase Pro, we have built a preference center into our pop-up form, and it goes out at the bottom of our newsletter. It has the link to the preference center. And basically, this preference center tells people what type of content would they like. And it's the type of content we have at the Dailyrx, which is politics, sport, pop culture, etc. And that's, like I said, it's present in every newsletter and in the second part of your sign-up journey. So you initially sign up, you'll get a newsletter saying you've signed up. And then 48 hours later, you get another newsletter that says, now that you've signed up, please fill in our preference center. So we don't have a capacity at this point, but we are looking at taking that information from the preference center to now send people specified and targeted content. And that's obviously going to help because it means taking that 8,000 people and now putting them into groups of perhaps 1,000 people, 2,000, maybe even 500 for a specific list. And that's going to help with ensuring better open rates, better engagement, because people now get the content they want instead of just us giving them a summary of the news. Yes, so that's me at the end of my presentation. I hope some of what I've spoken about has been helpful. If you have an existing newsletter or you're thinking of starting a newsletter, I really hope it's helpful in some way. Yeah, so that's, I think I'll take the questions now because I see. So Rona asked, what tools did you start with and end up with for making or curating the newsletter? So I'm not sure if you're referring to the email service provider, or is this, would you be able to perhaps unmute and then just ask me the question? I think that would make it a bit more helpful, if that's okay. Okay, I'm just looking through the other questions now. So Leah has asked, is the software, their software used to personalize names for each newsletter? So what that Cashbase Pro has, I'm sure Des could perhaps speak to the technology behind that, but basically it's a type of code that you just say insert. So just like you would insert the date or any other information, you can just insert the person's name or last name or full name. Yeah. So I hope that's answered. So subscribers, so that was with MailChimp, that they would give that context and audiences with different numbers, but I'm not exactly sure what is the difference between them. Again, I think Des would probably speak to them, speak to that. And Seppo has also asked, when is a good time to look at analytics? So I think I'm a bit obsessive in this. So the moment I send it out, I think I look at it every hour. But in terms of if I can look at whether it's successful or not, I look at it before I send out the previous newsletter. So like today, I'll go and check how last week's newsletter did. But that's just a personal thing. I'm not sure how other newsrooms do it and other people.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, I was in a noisy area. There's some construction work. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to know, because the layouts of the newsletters look different. So I wanted to know, sort of from a design perspective, it changed over time. What were you using to design the newsletters? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so the initial newsletters were MailChimp, and then we created a template that worked of our newsletter. And then even with Cashbase Pro, we kind of created our own template that worked for our audience. So MailChimp, you could obviously add blocks for the different things you want. And Cashbase is kind of similar in that. So we can add a text box, an image box, a button, which is a call to action kind of a thing. So it's kind of, we designed it in our own, but you can use, so for like Reengagement, I use the existing templates, and then I just switch it around depending on what we require. Like maybe I change the colors and the text and stuff like that. I hope that answered your question. Okay, I don't know if I've missed any questions, but I don't think so. So I think I'm going to hand over to Des. And I guess if there's anything else required from me, I'll get to it at the end of. So I'm going to hand over to Des.
Awesome, Fatima, thank you. That was very insightful, and thank you for the good words. To everyone here, welcome. I'll do a quick introduction as soon as I start sharing my screen. Just to clarify on Fatima's questions, if you guys have anything else that you'd like to ask of Fatima, be happy to take a few questions at the end of my session as well, but you're welcome to pop them in the chat while I'm busy speaking. And Fatima, you gave a really insightful talk. Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone has learned something thus far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sharing my presentation and kicking things off. And I just want to make sure that everyone can see that. It should be the screen in front of you. Let me just make 100% sure of that screen 2, and share. Great. Can everyone see my screen? I just want to be 100% certain there.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that. All right, so to kick things off, what I'm going to be discussing today is the newsletters in media in 2021. And what I'm going to be covering is pretty much how to select your email service provider and the right sort of software to utilize to send your emails. I'm also going to be discussing email strategy and how to go about beginning your email or your newsletter strategy, as well as making sure you can begin monetizing your emails, especially in the publishing space. So emails are growing, email and the newsletter space for publishers have become such an integral part of the mix, and that's what we're going to be speaking about today. All right, so what I'm going to do is kick things off, and just a quick introduction about me. My name is Des. I work for a company called Cashbase Pro in South Africa. We're based in Johannesburg. We have facilitated email marketing for companies for the last 16 years and continue to develop technology and services around the email sphere and helping organizations, especially in the publishing space, in facilitating their email marketing comms. So that's where I come from. My history is in the media and the sort of digital sphere. So you're welcome to interrupt me with any questions. I do have the chat open in front of me. And what I'm going to do is take you through these next couple of sections, page by page. All right. So to begin, I just want to chat about some numbers in the email marketing world, and you can see those there in front of you. The reason that email has become such a powerful tool is because there's so much potential behind the email world. I mean, if I look at the sort of South African average based on our research over the last couple of years and looking at some of the other email service providers in Africa, looking at your ROI in terms of the potential for email to earn your entity money, if you're doing email correctly in a segmented fashion, if you're doing it in an organized manner, you have a good strategy, on average, publishers that are doing this well are earning around 30 Rand for every Rand spent on email. Now this differs. I mean, if you look at these statistics in the US, you're looking at around $40 to $44 for every dollar spent on email. And if you look at the sort of EU Union, you're looking at around 40 to 42 euro for every euro spent on email. So there's definitely potential. It's definitely one of the higher ROI earning sort of digital channels, and it's got a lot of potential. Email is still growing. All right. So if you look at 2020, and I pulled that stat up, there were 306.4 billion emails sent in that period. So people are actively communicating in the digital sphere, and email is a core component of that communication. So how do you stand out? How are you different across those 306.4 billion emails is the question. And we're going to cover some of those topics today. In terms of the percentage of email opened, obviously mobile is a powerful tool in Africa to get your content consumed. And looking at our stats for last year, I mean, 63% of emails were opened on a mobile device. So making sure that your emails look good across various devices is going to become key. And we're going to address some of those features in our chat today, as well as the benchmarks for publishers, especially seeing as this is geared towards the media space. The average open rate on a media entity email is around 21.3%. Now, when we benchmark for clients, we aim for between 25 and 30%. That's one in just under every 3 people opening your email every time you send it. That's the goal. That's what you want to be aiming for. So here's a couple of metrics that just show the power of email. What we're going to kick off with first is how to go about choosing your email service provider. All right, so you are going to have these slides step by step. Please stop me if I am going too quickly, but I'd like to take you through these in a little bit more detail. And the first thing I want to begin with is what to look out for when choosing your ESP. Now, the right email service provider, which we're going to refer to as an ESP for the sake of this presentation, and choosing the right one is kind of like dating. So you'll kind of get lucky and find your partner for life early on, or you'll trial a ton of providers and experience great moments and disappointments until you find one that just clicks. Now, there's unfortunately no one size fits all in the email world. So considering a partner for email that can match your business needs is going to be critical for your email and comm success. And you may be asking yourself where to begin. In today's conversation, we're going to focus on practical tips that you and your business can use in selecting the right ESP. And what it's going to begin with is, where can you start? And in short, let's chat about ESPs and what an email service provider is. So you may be asking yourself, what does ESP stand for? And this is essentially a company that is the place that houses your inbox, your sent mails, and your draft emails. And the way that we see it, if you want to communicate with most businesses and people in 2021, you're going to need an ESP. Now, you may be familiar with the common personal ESPs. Those are your Gmails and your Yahoos, Outlook or iCloud Mail. The problem is that if you're scaling a business or you're scaling a publication, relying on these personal comms in the business email sphere and relying on providers like Gmail and Outlook is becoming a thing of the past. Though great for personal communication, they're not equipped to manage large volumes of email and provide the data, especially that you need to track your email performance. And that is where a bulk email service provider can come in. Okay, so what we need to look at here, first and foremost, is what is your email strategy? Now, choosing your email service provider is a very tedious task because you need to find one that meets your email strategy. And there are a few email elements that make an email strategy up. But what we want to look at first is what ESP makes that email marketing so effective. So before you start testing, solutions and providers, it's important to figure out how email marketing fits into your overall strategy. If it's done correctly, email is around 40 times more effective at acquiring new customers than Facebook or Twitter. And this is according to Campaign Monitor stats that I showed you guys earlier in 2019. Now, with all that potential, it's vital to make sure that you have clear goals and processes and tools in place, but you need to ask yourself a couple of questions. And generally, the questions that you need to consider when you're building an email strategy include the following types of things. And the first of those, what are your email marketing goals? So remember, each email needs to have a specific intention. Each email needs to have a specific goal. What are your goals across those various emails? The next is, how are you planning to achieve those goals? Do you have the right resources? Do you have the right support? And how do you and how will you use email? So is it just going to be newsletters? Is it going to be email automation, which is becoming a really important part of the email and communication sphere? Is it going to be things like premium subscriptions? That's going to form a core component of the way that you go about choosing your ESP. Now, another important part is what metrics you need to track. Remember, as Fatima said earlier, you get metrics that tell you about your success, and you get vanity metrics. Now, vanity metrics and what Fatima alluded to earlier are those things like email open rates. It's great to know that your email is getting opened, but is your content engaging? Is it being consumed, and are people taking action? Those are the kinds of things you need to measure. Conversion is going to become an important one when we speak about the monetization of emails, but it is going to be critical to track the right kinds of metrics for your business. Now, you also need to decide for yourself what features are critical and which features of a system are nice to haves. For some businesses, that will differ, but the answers to these will help dictate the features that you need and the priorities you need from an ESP. Now, something to note is the purpose of email marketing is to build relationships and grow your business. So think about where your business will be in a year or two, and make sure that the provider that you're choosing has the ability to scale with you. And this is one of the key considerations you need to make when choosing your ESP. So let's chat about tools and the features that you're going to need. What tools do you need to have in your arsenal to make sure that you can choose the right ESP? Now, what you'll want to make sure of from your email service provider is that the features you need and the features that provide are easy to use and easy to understand. Remember, no one is inherently classically trained in email marketing. And if you prioritize the features that you need with a couple of features that you want to make life easier, it helps you scale your newsletter, it helps you monetize your email better. And you can also use that as a criteria to evaluate potential email service providers. Now, to achieve the basics of email well, there are a few must-have features that every email sender's arsenal needs to include. And the first one is flexible templates. Now, people buy with their eyes. Fatima alluded to this earlier as well. When you use imagery, when you use key things that attract people's attention to your email, those are the kinds of things that get people to engage with your content. Now, the key part of email marketing is the emails you send your subscribers, and you'll need an email service provider that helps create a simple, elegant email in a quick and easy fashion. Remember, very few people are trained in this, and you need to be able to do it effectively to continue to scale your email efforts. So looking for a provider with a range of designs or flexible templates or layouts is especially important, because things like mobile-friendly templates that look good on all devices are going to become critical. As I mentioned earlier, over 63% of people are reading email on their mobile phone. And in South Africa, that number is around 60%. So does your email look good on the mobile device that they're using? The next measure is your performance tracking. Now, I spoke about these statistics earlier, but how else do you measure your ROI and the effectiveness of your email if your statistics and your metrics aren't properly tracked? Something you need to make sure that your ESP can provide is a consolidated view of all the statistics you need. Things like your open rates, yes, but things like your click rates, very important. What content are people actually taking action on? Things like your bounces, and this is something that many ESPs try and hide. Bounces dictate the deliverability of your email, and we're going to discuss deliverability a little bit further in the session, but bounces are critical to knowing if your email is actually hitting the inbox. Things like who is unsubscribing and tracking those are important from a legalities perspective. Remember, we've got different privacy laws that provide for someone to easily enter and leave your database. And you need to make sure that the system looks after those, as well as things like social sharing. Remember, email is not in isolation. It's part of the digital environment. And with the growth in the digital environment, how easily across different channels can that email be shared? So it's also key to ensure that your ESP can provide you with things like client engagement metrics and the ability to track your database's growth and decline. So as Fatima mentioned earlier, database growth is important because you have content you want to put in front of eyes, and you want to put them in front of the right eyes. So being able to track that effectively does bolster your email efforts. The third one I want to mention here is automated emails, and I discussed automation briefly earlier, but sending relevant messages to the right people at the right time is going to be key to building an engaged interactive audience. Now, automation is likely one of the best ways to do this, but you need to make sure that your email service provider offers effective workflows and helps you schedule and send automated messages in a decent fashion. And with the growth of digital transactions and things like e-commerce, automation is becoming crucial to reach subscribers when they're ready to interact with your publication, with your brand, with your business. It's a vital component of your email marketing mix. The last one here, and I keep coming back to this, is mobile responsiveness. And I repeat this again, your emails must work across various devices that people use to consume those emails. So as I mentioned, across Africa, across the globe, more than half of all the people consuming their content are doing so on mobile. And unless your campaigns are specifically optimized to work across all those devices or those mobile clients, you're missing out on conversions and revenue. So finding a system that allows you to test this before sending to your audience is key, and this can act as a big part of your ESP decision-making process. Okay, so another consideration to have when choosing your ESP is, does it meet your budget, and have you set a specific budget for email? Now, email doesn't necessarily have to require a large budget to be effective. That said, however, in marketing, effective often isn't enough. If you want to ensure that you create memorable emails, track the right metrics, and make sure that you've got all of the right features in place, you need to ensure that you've got the appropriate budget in place. Now, there are a few basic free email marketing tools that are available, and I think many people are familiar with some of the larger international free tools, but there are also email marketing tools that cost tens of thousands of rands or dollars or euros with heaps of advanced features and functions. A caution: be aware that free email service providers aren't necessarily the best option. And many small entities or smaller entities start with these free options. And in theory, free sounds great, but the problem is the bad email reputation you get painted with in sharing a sending server with a bad sender. Remember, bad senders use free email services to try and phish, to try and impersonate. And those are cautions you need to take care of because you're sharing the same email sending server as these bad senders. So if you can, try and avoid systems that provide you with free email sending. They don't attract good sending profiles. Now, choosing a system that is more feature-laden may also seem attractive in theory, but if you don't actually use all of those additional features, and remember, they take a lot of time to learn to use as well, you're throwing good money away. So choosing the right provider for your needs keeps your costs lower, it keeps the return on your efforts higher, and it still ensures that delivering the functionality that you need is there. And I agree with Rona, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Okay, so keep in mind that investing in email can result in a much better payoff than investing in the same amount in things like social or search or display. And remember that 40 Rand for every Rand spent, that's an important metric. You can achieve this by making the right types of email decisions. Now let's chat about deliverability. And it's probably the single most important thing you can consider when sending an email campaign. And have you checked the deliverability of the ESP you're going to be choosing? Now, email delivery is important when investing in your email program because you're building customer relationships, and investing more in email marketing doesn't just mean sending more emails. You have to have the chance to engage effectively with your email audiences, and your messages have to land in the inbox. So not every email service provider can ensure your emails get delivered at the same rate. And this is an important note to take care of. When selecting an ESP, asking a potential email service provider about their delivery rates and how they work with their customers to keep that rate high is likely the most important selection criteria you can make. Now, I've put a metric in there of 98% or higher. When selecting an ESP, something that you want to ensure is that the delivery rate hits the inbox at 98% or higher. which means that that bounce metric that I discussed earlier needs to be 2% or lower. The higher the bounce metric, the worse the email sending reputation of that ESP, the less your emails are going to hit the inbox. So keep in mind that delivery rates are a combination of how an email provider ensures delivery to the inbox in the back end, and also how you use the service. So be sure to ask for things like resources and guides that they offer, and things like best practice and content and list management, because those are crucial in ensuring you continue to hit the inbox. Email platforms with that free sending element, as I mentioned earlier, negatively impact your sending. So remember, sharing a sending server with a bad sender does detriment to your email campaigns, and electing a company that actively eradicates these bad senders is vital for those delivery rates. So, do you get the right supports? And this is something that's probably also one of the least considered but most crucial functions. Do you get the right support and service? Something that Fatima mentioned earlier was the crux for the Dailyrx in terms of the change in their email success was support, was guidance, was having a little bit of hands-on help, because not everyone knows everything, and knowing that you can work with an expert in that field is going to be very important for your email service selection. So ideally, your email service provider should function as an extension of your marketing team. They need to do so seamlessly and without much hassle. And this is especially crucial when you need help, because that happens, and speaking to a bot when something like that happens and waiting for an answer for 3 days is not an effective way to do email. So it's critical to have access to a smart and resourceful customer support team to help you address your email issues. Now, you may be asking yourself, where do I begin with this? And a couple of places to begin and look at as indicators of email service levels include things like the following. And I'm going to discuss all 4 of these. And the first one is testing the customer service. Now, see how long it takes to get through to a representative or the support line via phone or email. Usually that's a good indicator. If someone has taken more than 48 hours to reply to a query, what does that mean in an emergency situation? Groundbreaking news has taken place. You need to get communication out. You sit with an issue and no one is able to help you. What does that mean? And that's an important note to take. Things like browsing online knowledge bases, those show the expertise of the team that you're going to be working with. Things like blogs, things like their newsletters. Look at those resources and see for yourself what sort of expertise these people provide, and you'll have the ability to choose effectively. Asking for help when migrating systems is also going to be a key one. If the customer services team from your ESP is able to help you import your lists, able to help you create effective segmentation in your database, and following functions like that, it is a good indicator of further support and service, as well as asking what other resources they offer to help customers succeed with email. Remember, many service levels differ across these ESPs. Some are purely a platform, some carry some level of basic support, some take that completely to the other spectrum and do full-on managed services that act as an outsourced member of your team. My recommendation, obviously, look before the former. Now, Tsepo, you have a question. How do we ensure that newsletters land in a subscriber's main mailboxes other than promotions or the sort of, what's the other mailbox on Gmail, and you get those on Outlook as well? I'm going to interrupt myself here and just answer that question quickly, but that is usually determined by the content. If you're sending content that is promotional, sending content that usually has a price attached to it or some numbers in it, generally they wind up in that promotion box. When you get sent transactional emails, things like notifications from a system, things like other emails that are unrelated to promotional activity, like informational emails, they tend to wind up in your other section. And when you have one-to-one communication, so things like emailing someone that you know, or emails coming from a system that you're privy to, those usually wind up in your main inbox. So again, they don't reveal the way that they allocate these mails across these mailboxes, because they know that entities will take advantage of that. So it is a guessing game. There's no sure science in dictating where your email is going to land. The main thing is repetition. If you're able to repeat something that successfully wound up in the main inbox, you may wind up there further and further. The other one that people don't consider is people engaging with your content. If your emails aren't opened, they aren't clicked, the likelihood that it goes into promotions and then into spam is quite high. That is how they dictate engagement in the way that they allocate emails into your inbox. So getting people to open, getting people to click generally is an indicator of getting your email into the main inbox tab because you're engaging with it. So replies are a key one. We found that in our industry, replies are a good factor in getting your email into the main inbox because there's a one-to-one engagement happening. I hope that's answered your question, Seppo. I'm going to jump back in over here. So to finish off this section, while a lot of free ESP tools might seem appealing, many aren't set up to support you when you really need it. And if you're a professional marketer with things like goals and KPIs to achieve, you need to know that if something goes wrong, you can get hold of someone quickly. And you're much better off using a professional email tool that offers things like round-the-clock support and customer service, and especially one that understands the African email environment, which is a rarity. So to recap, and choosing the perfect email service provider is going to be critical to your company's success. And it doesn't have to be difficult. Using the tips from the session may help you make a more informed decision, but let's look at that in summary. So firstly, going back to considering your strategy, you need to define your email marketing goals. You want to decide on the types of emails you're going to be sending. You want to go further than that to decide on what email metrics make sense for you to track, as well as deciding on the features that are important to scaling your email marketing. In terms of ranking those features, you need to look at things like templates. Looking for a range of mobile-friendly templates or designs and things with flexible capabilities are key. And tracking, getting a dashboard with statistics and metrics that make sense for your business is going to be important, as well as automation for workflows and customer journeys to engage with people automatically, and ensuring your email looks good on mobile devices. Looking at your budget, the two most important points here are to make sure you allocate the right budget to achieve your email goals, as well as investing in email marketing to build customer relationships. If you don't do this, you're missing a key component of the digital comms sphere. And lastly, you want to look at your delivery rates. So look for an average delivery rate of 98% or higher, and find a solid email service provider with a good history, with a good reputation, and one that works to keep delivery rates high. Last but not least, you've got your support. Look at how long it takes to reach this team. Ask them for help when doing your migration and accessing things like online resources to tell you how effective they are, as well as looking at what other resources they offer is critical to your email success. Okay, make sure that they understand your market, and the African market is a very intricate one. We communicate in a specific way across all of these plethora of cultures and businesses. So make sure you find one that fits the niche that you're looking to go for. All right. Speaking about strategy, the next section of this talk is going to jump into selecting the right email strategy to grow your database, as well as avoiding that spam box. Now, before I kick off, I'm going to give 5 seconds for questions. So if anyone would like to pop a question into the chat, let me know, and I'm going to kick that part off in the next couple of seconds. All right, so I'll answer questions in between, but let's kick things off. So deciding on the right email strategy, and regardless of your industry, I have a little bit of bad news for you. Your database is very likely out of date. Your emails are going to spam, and this means nobody's really reading them. So you may be asking yourself, why send an email? And as I alluded to earlier, email is still one of the most effective, cost-saving, and personalized ways to reach your audience. The difference, though, is that your email environment needs a little bit of special attention. If you look at the long answer, the key to getting this right is a couple of steps you need to take. And the first one starts with your database. So what we're going to kick off with here is how to go about getting that audience to grow. Now, in the email game, one of the most frequently asked questions we get by companies is, how do I grow my email database? Because growing an email database from email is a very difficult challenge. Unless you have a lead magnet in place, unless you have really loyal subscribers that are constantly sharing your content, it does become very difficult. So there isn't an easy or simple answer to this. The fact of the matter is that growing an engaged and valuable email database isn't an easy process. It does take time, it does take effort and resources. So let's see what you can do as a starting step to begin. Now, I just want to, before I jump into that first one there about adding sign-up forms to your website, there is a golden rule, and it's 2021. You do not want to purchase a database. This creates bad friends. Okay, there's so many legalities around this anyway, so no one should be purchasing a database. And what these also do is they wind up resulting in things like high spam complaints. They wind up with a damaged sending reputation, and worse, you can wind up with a damaged company reputation. So what you want to do is spend your time and effort and resources in growing your database organically. And there's several ways that you can go about doing this. The first one, and this is something that we did with the guys at the Dailyrx, is adding a sign-up form or a pop-up form to a website. Now, using your website to grow your database is encouraging people who visit the site to sign up to that database. This is an effective manner if you're sharing content that people enjoy consuming, because they want to be notified of more content, especially in the publishing space. And this is the starting point to getting people into the email environment. Another one is making use of various social channels. And the first one of those is Facebook. Now, Facebook has become a news consuming platform in itself, as well as a social platform. So almost most people out there have a Facebook profile. And why not use your current Facebook audience to grow your email database? 3 quick things that you can do from Facebook to build your database. The first one of those is change the button on your Facebook page to a sign up button and direct people to email sign up form. Many people just direct people straight to the website, and it's great for website traffic, but why not capture those people into the database and then get them to the website from there? You've got their details, you can communicate with them more personally, you have the opportunity to get them in from Facebook. You want to also look at constantly asking people to join, not just on your page, but also in your posts. So in your content planning, ensure that you strategically add a sign-up form to various posts. Show them snippets of exclusive content. Sometimes you can gate content to even get people into the database through those posts. You also want to look at things like running Facebook lead ads and using middleware software. I know there's tools like Zapier, for example, that feeds people automatically into your email account. Okay. Another great way is use of LinkedIn. Now, this is a professional networking sort of tool that you can use, but it's one of the best places to grow your email list. However, it needs to be done properly and ethically. Many people are currently disengaged to messages on LinkedIn. You get spammed by a ton of people on LinkedIn. So having context and targeting your message structure at the right receiver is key. So adopting things like a regular invite process for people that you're targeting, making use of things like LinkedIn to market your business, to encourage signups. Those are the kinds of things that you can do to ensure that people are moving through to your database. So again, using snippets of exclusive content, requiring an email sort of address to access that is a great way to, as an example, grow your email database. There are also other social channels. So adding a link to the sign-up form in your Instagram bio or on your Pinterest page, or even in your WhatsApp for business profile, wherever you can reach a customer or that you have a touch point with them, try and entice them to leave their details with you. The last of those is, once someone's in that database, to keep them there, send good emails. So by sending readers well-curated email content, you're more likely to get them to stay subscribed. And this will help maintain your email database with customers who actually enjoy your emails and are more likely to share those with the people in their network. Okay. Let's chat a little bit about spam. Everyone knows what this is. Everyone kind of has an idea about what it means, but how do you keep yourself out of the spam box? Now let's chat about spam and email game. If your emails aren't being delivered, and if your emails aren't hitting the inbox, you're wasting your time and your money sending these. Let's look at what spam filters are and what you can do to avoid them and get to a subscriber's inbox. And the first one is, what do these mean? Now, a spam filter is designed to protect users, and email providers like your Gmails and your Outlooks and Apple Mail use spam filters to ensure messages don't clutter a user's inbox or harm them. Now, these spam filters act as a shield, analyzing incoming emails and allowing the good ones to reach the inbox while filtering the bad ones into the spam filter or even blocking them completely. Previously, these email providers would only analyze your email content, so they'd look for spammy content. Nowadays, there's a lot more involved when it comes to getting an email blocked by a spam provider. As I mentioned earlier, they look at things like engagement or interaction between yourself and your audience, and they use your past campaign metrics, those emails that have been opened and clicked, to inform where your email is going to land when you send it again. So good email delivery is key, getting to that inbox is key, and if people are engaging with your content, you're more likely to continue winding up in the inbox. What you also want to focus on is what customers do with your emails. So essentially, you want them to take a couple of actions, and the first of those is to open them. So when readers frequently open your emails, email providers see this as a good sign and improve your email reputation. You want people to reply. Remember, I said engagement. When readers reply to email, email providers take this engagement into account and grant you a better email reputation. If you do happen to wind up in spam, many customers move an email out of junk and add you as a trusted sender. You can do this in Outlook or move you out of the junk folder. That's a strong action and a positive signal that your campaigns are relevant and worthy of making it to the inbox. And in terms of moving, you've also got moving emails to other folders. So if, for example, as Sepo mentioned earlier, an email winds up in promotions and someone moves that into their main inbox, it is a good indicator to the ESP that the email should wind up in the inbox in future. Last but not least, you've got that add to address book type of situation. So if your recipients add your email address to their address book, the email providers see this as a sign of approval and help you hit the inbox far easier. Okay. What you don't want people to do is move your email to their junk folder. So when readers move your email to their junk folder, this is seen as a negative sign with the email provider, and they're less likely to deliver your emails in future, as well as deleting your emails without opening. Now, when a reader deletes an email without opening it, the email provider sees this as negative and again, may move this over to the spam folder. How do we go about avoiding spam filters? The first point here is only email people that have permitted you to do so. So make sure of consent, make sure of opt-in, and build your email list organically through people signing up to receive your emails. What you also want to do is use a known from name. So one of the first things that a subscriber sees is your name. And this plays a big part in whether the recipient opens your email or not. Using a from name that your recipients are going to recognize best always works. So for example, on Friday morning, when I see that email hit my inbox from Fatima Musa, I know that there's content waiting from the Dailyrx that I can go in and consume, and I'm familiar with that email coming through. Using a real reply to address, we mentioned earlier that you want your recipients to reply to emails. Now, email providers know that people are not going to reply to junk and spam emails. They see this as a good sign if users are replying to your mails. So using something like a do not reply address doesn't work well for this. Rather use an address that users or customers can reply to. And the last of these tips is to send targeted email campaigns. If you're going to go for a spray and pray approach, which never works, you want to be able to switch your strategy to send targeted emails to segmented groups of your database. Being sort of segmented and sending tailored content to your recipients is more likely to get them to open and engage with your emails, which will further improve your email sending reputation with these providers. Now, you may be thinking that growing your database or staying out of the spam filter is a ton of effort, but for most of you that follow these sorts of basic principles and these suggestions, you'll almost likely see an immediate change in the way that your emails are landing in that inbox. Okay, so those are a couple of tips on how to go about avoiding the spam filter and growing your database. If anyone has any questions, I'll give a couple of seconds for questions, and then we're going to jump into the last part of this around how to best go about monetizing your email marketing and strategy. So are there any questions? Let's see over here. Tepo, in terms of newsletters, Fatima at the Dailyrx, and it can be seen as coming from Fatima, but when someone replies, you can set a different reply to address. Because Fatima is running around and busy with all of these things, you can create something like a central reply to inbox that those replies can go to, and anyone in the organization could go in and engage with your contacts. That's a good way we go about doing it. That's a way that we usually recommend going about this process. Nankululeko, you asked the question about how do you segment your email customers and audience? And is this done according to interest? Now, there's a couple of ways you can go about segmenting your audience. The first is on known data. So in terms of known data, things like where they're situated. So area-based segmentation works great. Things like their company, things like their industry. It depends on the information you're obtaining when you're collecting that data. Always a great way to begin segmenting. And then as people engage with you on email, you want to create things like behavioral segments. So those behavioral segments are things like what percentage of emails are they opening? How engaged are these subscribers? What are they showing interest in? So if they're interested in different types of content or showing interest in different on that, but it's a lovely question. Thank you. Let's kick off on the email monetization side of things. So choosing when to monetize an email as a publisher can be a tricky process. And there are a few key factors to consider before asking your audience or advertisers to fund your newsletter. And this is key for publishers, especially moving forward, as not only to continue running, but to ensure to compete in a tough market. Let's chat about where to begin. So to begin with a couple of stats again and a couple of insights, let's chat about some numbers in the email publishing space. And the first one we're going to chat about is subscriptions. So subscriptions at international organizations like the New York Times or the Atlantic and Substack have grown month on month for the past year, and they're not showing any sign of slowing down. On top of that, there have also been high-profile acquisitions. Things like the Morning Brew, the Hustle, and Review, all of those are strong, recognized newsletters. So this means that the belief in email is not waning in any way, contrary to what many people may think. The decline in print has actually bolstered email in the publishing platform and in the media space. So email is going to become a very effective tool for the growth of your sort of business monetization moving forward. Now, there are also a plethora of international entrepreneurial efforts. So big names at things like BuzzFeed or TechCrunch, or even Vox and Rolling Stone have left to start their own newsletters. And they realize the power behind these newsletters. So the question is, are you sharing in this success profitably? Now, looking at the email world, what is ideal for my business or my newsroom? Now, there are essentially three ways to make money from a newsletter. And the first of those is free subscriptions that are monetized via either affiliate advertising or advertising within those newsletters. These form the majority of publications, especially small and niche publications, but this varies across different industries. The other one here is low price subscriptions, which are emails that are monetized via things like niche verticals. Now, these are usually more established niche publishers with a unique audience and some very specific content, which often lead to, as they grow, higher price subscriptions. Now, these are monetized by loyalty and value. They're a lot more established, they have large publications and audiences, and not just a single niche, but various niches with large subscriber bases, as well as a growing subscriber base that advocates for these brands. So what would you like to achieve, and what do you want to aim for? Is it a subscription-based model, a low-priced or a high-priced one? The answer is actually all three. So what you want to do is aim for all three as you grow. Now, each on their own is nice, but together they are worth far more. And it's about spreading the ability to earn from your publication. That makes sense. So you can develop each one as your entity grows, but you want to begin by growing your free list first. And that starts with the monetization of ads or affiliate deals. Now, this is a great way to begin creating revenue to grow your publication and adding additional value to your audience. But that has a natural progression to developing a niche audience. And once you develop a niche audience, you can develop niche subscriptions that people on your free list are willing to pay for. With this added value, it gives you the opportunity to begin the subscription process. The key here is added value and developing content that your audience is willing to pay for. Because if they aren't willing to pay for that, it isn't going to be able to monetize. You can then move from there to diversifying your revenue, and that grows the lifetime value of the readers who join multiple subscriptions across your niches. And growing both your subscription revenue and an audience with various advertisers looking for the database segments that you offer is going to be key. So where does this all begin? And what you want to do is focus on your audience. You want to focus on what you feel is missing from the world rather than what you feel or hope will be popular. Now, here's a couple of profitable international audiences. And what you'll notice as I speak through these stats is that value doesn't always scale with list size. So you don't need a huge list to make money from email. The trick, however, is to be as niche as you possibly can. So looking at these successful international publications, starting with the Ferrari market letter, I mean, these are a niche market of Ferrari superfans. Their subscription base is around 5,000 subscribers, yet they're generating around $2 million annually. If you look at something like the Petition newsletter, which is a niche about bankruptcy law, they've got a large audience, about 10 times that size, at around 50,000 subscribers, yet they're only making between $529,000 and $648,000 US dollars a year. The Newsette, however, an upwardly sort of mobile women in business niche, has a subscription that's 10 times that size at 500,000 subscribers, and they're making around $13 million a year from the email campaigns. So as you can see here, the email sort of database size does not necessarily mean that you won't make money. It's about the value added to your niche. Your audience is going to be crucial when it comes to the monetization process, and it's key that your subscribers need to be ready to spend money. Now, this ultimately dictates your audience's value and impacts how you can charge for things like affiliate ads or normal ads or things like paid subscriptions. And in the past, niches such as finance and business-related news worked really well. However, they had a great appeal to advertisers, which created a longer-term lifetime value for the reader. And that is important because globally, the two most popular ways to monetize a free newsletter are your affiliates and your advertising. So looking at affiliates and ads, what you want to be able to do is partner with the company where you're paid commission for each of those times you send a product, or with ads, for example, when customers pay you in order to reach your audience. So regardless of purchase or not, this is where you go about defining that. Okay, so you can see there's your affiliates, there's your advertising, and those are the two ideal ways to go about this process. You may be asking yourself, where do you begin? And I'm going to be ending off shortly. I know that there's not a lot of time left, but let's look at how you can do this in a linear fashion to begin with. Now, looking at the publisher monetization growth cycle, where can you start? And the first of those is to begin advertising. As your audience grows, you can start selling ads. You can either use something like a cost per send or a cost per open method. It's going to depend on your niche. It's going to depend on your business. The second step is defining those niches. That is the stage that Fatima is talking about in segmenting your database. Find things your audience is willing to pay for that is of interest to a specific niche. These can be more defined or can be parts of a free newsletter that can become a vertical. The third progression on this is finding those low price subscriptions. So generating a recurring audience of revenues while adding value and segmenting your loyal subscribers is the next sort of process you follow into the premium subscription space, which is defining who is an avid fan, delving deeper into those verticals and finding niches or highly niched audiences that make sense for your business. Those are completely valuable to advertisers. If I can end with a point, something to remember, do not charge for the same content. Doing so makes you look disingenuous, especially to your audience, and these can cost you both your database and your reputation. In the news space, people hate clickbait, so give them what they've asked for. All right, so that's a wrap from my side. I want to thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to get in touch and discuss your email monetization, as I mentioned earlier, work for Cashbase Pro. My details are on the slide, so if you would like those details, you can pop that into the questions. And what I'd like to do before closing is just take a couple of questions and see if anyone would like any more information, and then we can wrap things up.
Also, I see we had 2 questions from the Wova app, so maybe we can just tackle those questions as well. Someone asked, I'm not sure, doesn't have a name, but someone asked if we deployed a PDF newsletter. So the Dailyrx hasn't deployed a PDF newsletter, so I wouldn't be able to speak on this, but maybe Des, I don't know if you know anything about the technical side. And someone asked the best newsletter platforms, and I think Des has answered that. Obviously, it depends on the different metrics that people are going to have. So, yeah.
Perfect. So let me quickly address those two. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to be as brief as I can. But in terms of deploying a PDF newsletter, it's something that we recommend against. And the reason for this is because PDFs often flag a spam filter. Something that many people are not aware of is if a PDF is sent from a bulk platform, it can attach malware, it can attach information that is unsolicited, it can contain things that people shouldn't be seeing, which is why they aren't attached. Remember, the receiving system cannot read what is in that PDF, which means that it's likely to mark it as suspicious and send it into your spam box. So if you are doing a newsletter and you do require it to be longer than the email environment where you're not directing people to a website, host that PDF somewhere and track the people clicking through from your email campaign to that PDF. A simple trackable link in an email campaign can tell you how many people are going through to that, how many people are reading it. And if you're using things like, and I'm getting a bit advanced here, but UTM tagging, you can then track where they go from the PDF to your website if you've got calls to action in that, and actually see if they turn into a conversion or a customer. In terms of the second question, and that second question over here says, what are the best online newsletter platforms besides MailChimp? Now, I'm very biased because I work for Cashbase Pro, but you've seen the results. I mean, Fatima shared those. So if anyone would like to chat about those, we specialize in email in the African environment, but there are a plethora of other systems out there. If you want to use those key criteria from today's chat to assess and make that decision, that's what I would recommend. Assess them all fairly, assess them all feature for feature, and make sure that they meet the needs that you have, because again, there's no one size fits all in the email sphere. All right, so I think I've answered everything. Is there any other questions that anyone would like to ask before we wrap things up?
I'll maybe just jump in quickly. So Nankululeko's question about segmenting audiences. So I mean, Des did touch on this, and we do also collect information around where people are staying. I mean, the province is not like where they're staying exactly generalized, but in terms of our future plans, it's going to be according to kind of interest of the news. So like I said, whether it's political, student affairs, all of those various verticals that we cover at the Daily Box. So that's going to be, so it's going to be interest-based. And on the PDF thing, I mean, again, I don't have much, but like the continent kind of uses a PDF, the MNG is the continent, but I don't think it's technically a newsletter. They just send the PDF newspaper in an email. So I don't think it's technically newsletter. But yeah, if there's any other questions or on this, I think we'll probably be wrapping up. Because I think we've had quite a long session today. But yeah, if anyone has anything to drop in the chat box or Q&A, please let us know.
Thank you for the feedback, Konati. It was a pleasure to have you join us. That is us. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure. We're going to be moving on to some of the next sessions as we go along. So yes, let's jump right into that. Thank you all. Join us at 12 for a panel discussion on the building products and workflows in African newsrooms. That's going to be coming up at 12 p.m. today. And look out for that. That's going to be next on the agenda. Thereafter, at 2:30, join us for a workshop on product thinking and development for newsrooms. And after that, remember to join us for our virtual exhibition and evening starting at 5 p.m. CAT. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, that's all from our side. Thank you for the session. Thank you for all of the panelists for joining us, and thank you for all of the contributions. We'll see you at the next session, and I wish everyone a lovely day further.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Singamaqhawe.
Sisi wenyewe ni mashujaa.
Nous sommes nos propres héros.
Tirimagamba pachedu.
We are our own heroes.
Power to the innovators, the DIYers across the continent.
Power to you who push the doors wide open.
Power to you who've planted good seed on fertile African ground. We celebrate you. Thank you for joining us. Visit our websites and social media platforms to continue the conversation.